Hello everyone and welcome to this writing lesson. In addition to unity, which you learned before, every good paragraph must have coherence. A coherent paragraph flows smoothly from beginning to end. A reader can follow your ideas easily because one sentence leads naturally to the next one, and there are no sudden jumps. There are three main ways to make your paragraph coherent. One, you should use nouns and pronouns consistently throughout a paragraph. Two, use transition signals to show relationships among ideas. And three, put your ideas into some kind of logical order, such as logical division of ideas. Let's first take a look at using nouns and pronouns consistently. One way to achieve coherence is to use nouns and pronouns consistently throughout a paragraph. That is, to continue to use the same nouns and pronouns you start with. For example, if you begin with a plural noun, such as students, don't change to singular, such as a student. Also, don't change pronouns. Don't switch from you to they or he for no reason. Be consistent. If you use the pronoun you at the beginning of your paragraph, keep it throughout. Take a look at this paragraph. Notice how nouns and pronouns in this paragraph have been changed to make them consistent. Please pause your video, look at the paragraph, read it completely, and then play the video again. Here is a tip to help you use pronouns consistently. Use a plural noun rather than a singular noun when you're writing about a group of people of both sexes. When you need to use pronouns, the plural pronouns like they, them, and their are less awkward than the singular phrases like he or she, him or her, and his or hers. Take a look at these examples. An employee must wear his or her ID badge at all times. Now this is a bit awkward. It would be more natural to say employees must wear their ID badges at all times. Another way to give a paragraph coherence is to use transition signals. Transition signals are words and phrases that connect the idea in one sentence with the idea in another sentence. They are expressions such as first, second, furthermore, on the other hand, for example, and in conclusion. Transition signals are like traffic signals. They tell your reader when to slow down, turn around, and stop. Using transition signals makes your paragraph smoother and helps your reader understand it more easily. You have already used several transition signals. You practiced using time order signals, spatial order signals, plus 3 signals for examples. In this unit, you will practice using others. Take a look at these 2 paragraphs. Please read both and compare them. Is paragraph 1 easier to understand or paragraph 2? Why? Please pause your video, read the 2 paragraphs, and then play the video again. Paragraph 2 is easier to read and understand because the writer has used transition signals. Each transition signal shows the relationship of one idea to the next. Let's take a look at the transition signals in paragraph 2. Here, first of all, tells you to look for the first main point. For example, tells you to look for an example of the previous point. Therefore, tells you that this is a result. Furthermore and moreover, tell you to look for another similar idea. On the other hand, tells you to look for a contrasting or opposite idea. For instance, also tells you to look for an example. As a result, tells you to look for a consequence of the previous point. Let's review those you know and learn a few new ones. You will also learn new ways to use them. Please pause your video, go through all the transitions, and then play your video again. Now let's go over some general rules for placing and punctuating these transition signals. The words and phrases in the sentence connectors column often come at the beginning of a sentence. They are usually followed by a comma. There are 3 exceptions. Now, soon, and then do not need a comma. Now let's take a look at some examples where they come at the beginning of the sentence. First of all, comma, zoos protect animals from their natural enemies. In short, comma, advertising helps both buyers and sellers. Then, no comma, remember, press the tab key on your keyboard. Sentence connectors can also come in the middle of a sentence. We usually, but not always, separate them from the rest of the sentence with a comma or commas. Some people, comma, on the other hand, comma, object to keeping wild animals in cages. You can also use keyboard shortcuts to type foreign letters and symbols. Remember, no comma between 2 parts of a verb phrase. Sentence connectors can come at the end of a sentence. We usually separate them from the rest of a sentence with a comma. They are protected and can live without risk of being attacked, comma, therefore. Anti-zoo groups say that wild animals do not reproduce well in captivity, comma, for example. Use the words in the coordinating conjunctions column to connect 2 simple sentences to make a compound sentence. Put a comma after the first simple sentence. Look at this example. All their needs are taken care of, comma, so most zoo animals are healthy and contented. The words in the others column are adjectives and prepositions. They have no special punctuation. The first characteristic of a good politician is skill at public speaking. Another type of advertisement is aimed at children. Some people enjoy dangerous sports such as bungee jumping and skydiving. Let's take a look at 2 sentence errors now. They are called run-ons and comma splices. Run-ons and comma splices are similar errors. Both happen when you join sentences incorrectly. A run-on happens when you join 2 simple sentences without a comma and without a connecting word. For example, men like to shop quickly, women like to browse. A comma splice error happens when you join 2 simple sentences with a comma alone. For example, men like to shop quickly, comma, women like to browse. There are 3 easy ways to correct run-on and comma splice errors. 1. Join the 2 sentences with a comma and a coordinating conjunction such as and, but, or, so. For example, men like to shop quickly, comma, but women like to browse. Make 2 sentences. Separate the 2 sentences with a period. For example, men like to shop quickly, period. Women like to browse. If you wish to show the relationship between the 2 sentences, add a sentence connector and a comma to the second sentence. For example, men like to shop quickly, period. However, comma, women like to browse. Correcting run-ons and comma splices is relatively easy. Finding them is often the real challenge. Here are 3 tips to help you recognize run-ons and comma splices. 1. Check all sentences that have a comma in the middle. For example, my best subject is computer science, comma, my worst subject is English. So if you find a sentence like this with a comma in the middle, this is how you can check to see if there is an error. Ask yourself these questions. What is the first subject in this sentence? What verb goes with it? Read further. Is there another subject with its own verb? If the answer is yes, look for a coordinating conjunction. If there is none, then this is a comma splice. So how can we correct this comma splice error? You can do this in 2 ways. 1, make them 2 separate sentences by using a period. 2, add a coordinating conjunction after the comma. For example, my best subject is computer science, period. My worst subject is English, period. Or, my best subject is computer science, comma, and my worst subject is English. Read a long sentence aloud. Sometimes reading aloud helps you to recognize where a new sentence should begin. So, look at this run-on sentence. I will try to read it as one sentence. Advertising is a multi-billion-dollar industry in the United States. More than $200 billion is spent on advertising and advertising-related activities each year. When you read the sentence aloud, do you pause between United States and more? I did. More is the first word of a new sentence. So the correction would be like this. Advertising is a multi-billion-dollar industry in the United States, period. More than $200 billion is spent on advertising and advertising-related activities each year. Look for words like then, also, and therefore in the middle of a sentence. These words are danger words because they frequently occur in comma splices. Look at this comma splice. We drove into this city, comma, then we spent 30 minutes looking for a place to park. Now, to correct this is how you do it. We drove into the city, comma, and then we spent 30 minutes looking for a place to park. So we added a coordinating conjunction. Another way, we drove into the city and spent 30 minutes looking for a place to park. Or, we drove into the city, period. Then we spent 30 minutes looking for a place to park. Let's look at clauses now. A clause is a group of words that contains at least one subject and one verb. Look at these 2 clauses. Anna left the party early because she was tired. There are 2 kinds of clauses in English, independent and dependent. An independent clause can be a sentence by itself. Independent clause is another name for simple sentence. Here are 2 independent clauses. Anna left the party early. Here you have a subject and a verb, so you have a complete sentence. And this is an independent clause. Hold the cat's mouth closed. This is an imperative, so again, it's a complete sentence by itself. A dependent clause, in contrast, cannot be a sentence by itself because its meaning is not complete. A dependent clause depends on something else to complete its meaning. Look at 2 dependent clauses now. Because she was tired. This is a dependent clause. Or while you count to 10. Again, a dependent clause. Let's look at complex sentences now. A complex sentence is a combination of one independent clause and one or more dependent clause or clauses. Look at these two examples. Anna left the party early. This is an independent clause, a subject and a verb. Because she was tired. This is a dependent clause. It has a subject and a verb, but the meaning by itself is not complete. Look at the other example. Hold the cat's mouth closed while you count to 10. Usually, the clauses can be in any order. However, the punctuation is different. Let's look at a comma rule. In a complex sentence, when the dependent clause comes first, separate the clauses with a comma. When the independent clause comes first, do not separate them. For example, because she was tired, comma, Anna left the party early. So here you have the dependent clause first, so you need a comma. Look at another example. Anna left the party early because she was tired. Here, you don't need a comma because you first have the independent clause. A dependent clause always begins with a subordinating word or subordinator. There are different kinds of subordinators. Time subordinators begin a clause that tells when something happens. Reason subordinators begin a clause that tells why something happens. Place subordinators begin a clause that tells where something happens or where something is located. Now let's look at compare and contrast paragraphs. Comparison and contrast is a technique that we use every day. For example, we compare and contrast courses and teachers when we decide which classes to take. We compare and contrast products and prices when we shop. An employer compares and contrasts applicants for a job, and a job applicant compares and contrasts job offers. In college classes, you will often have to compare and contrast. For example, in a history class, you might be asked to compare and contrast two historical figures or two events. In a literature class, you might have to compare two poems or two characters in a play. Knowing how to write comparison and contrast paragraphs is a very useful skill. When we compare two or more things, we tell what is similar about them. When we contrast things, we tell what is different about them. Usually the emphasis is on the differences, but sometimes a paragraph describes both similarities and differences. You're going to read model paragraph 1 and 2, and then decide which one emphasizes differences and which one describes both differences and similarities. Please pause your video, read this paragraph, and then play your video again when you're finished. Now, before you read paragraph 2, first take a look at this chart that the personnel manager for a medical laboratory prepared. In the chart, she summarized the qualifications of two applicants for a summer job as a receptionist in a medical laboratory. I want you to first compare the qualifications of applicant JZ and SW in the chart. Then you will read paragraph 2, which is the memo written by the personnel manager to her boss. Then answer the 6 questions about the 2 paragraphs. Now please pause your video, take a look at this, and play your video again when you're finished. There are 2 ways to organize a comparison-contrast paragraph. One way is called the block organization, and the other way is called point-by-point organization. In block organization, you group all the similarities together in one block and all the differences together in one block. Both model paragraphs use the block organization. In point-by-point organization, you write about similarities and differences by subtopic. For example, if you're comparing and contrasting several wireless telephone plans, you might compare and contrast them on these subtopics. For example, you first mention the cost of a telephone about the two plans, and you talk about both their similarities and differences. Then you move on to their monthly rates, and again, you talk about their similarities and differences, and so on. If you have a lot to say about each subtopic, you may need to write a separate paragraph for each one. The pattern of organization you choose depends on your topic. Also, whether you discuss more similarities or more differences, or both, depends on your topic again. A topic sentence for comparison-contrast paragraph should name the topic and also indicate comparison-contrast organization. Look at these two topic sentences. In both, you can easily find the topic and a controlling idea. The controlling idea in both show that we are going to see a comparison-contrast paragraph. For example, the left and right sides of your brain process information in different ways. Or, when buying wireless telephone service, you should compare different plans on 4 points. A concluding sentence for a comparison-contrast paragraph may repeat the main idea. In this paragraph, the main idea is that both applicants stand out. And this sentence is repeating the main idea, so it could be written as a concluding sentence. For example, the hiring decision is difficult because both applicants are so similar. A concluding sentence may also make a recommendation. So this sentence could also be written as a concluding sentence because it is making a recommendation. For example, however, JX would be the better choice for the receptionist job because of her experience with patient contact and preference for working with her staff. And here is another recommendation that could make a good concluding sentence. In my opinion, the Televox telephone is the best choice for our company. Just as there are signal words and phrases that help your reader understand time order, there are also words and phrases that help your reader understand similarities and differences. As you read this model paragraph, see if you can find the comparison-contrast signals. Answer the 4 questions when you're finished reading. Please pause your video, do the reading, and then play the video again. Let's look at comparison signals. Now, here is a chart of the words and phrases that show similarities. Sentence connectors can appear in various places in a sentence. For example, Tokyo is the financial heart of Japan. Similarly, or likewise, comma, New York is the center of banking and finance in the United States. Also, often appears in the middle or at the end of a sentence. Don't use also with a semicolon. By the way, a semicolon is used to separate 2 independent clauses or 2 simple sentences that are related. Now look at the examples with also. Tokyo is a major financial center. New York is a center of banking and finance also. Another example, Tokyo is the financial heart of Japan. New York is also a center of banking and finance. And to usually comes at the end of a sentence. It often appears together with the coordinating conjunction and. Some writers put a comma before to at the end of a sentence, but it is not required. Take a look at this example. Tokyo is a center of style and fashion, semicolon. New York is, comma, to. Another example, Tokyo is a center of style and fashion, comma, and New York is too. As is a subordinating word. It begins a dependent clause. The word just makes it stronger. Notice that you use a comma even when the independent clause comes first. This is an exception to the usual rule. For example, Tokyo is trendy and hip, comma, as or just as New York is. These words act like adjectives. That is, they describe nouns. For example, Tokyo's and New York's traffic problems are similar, equal, or the same. Another example, Tokyo and New York have similar, equal, or the same traffic problems. These words act like prepositions. They come in front of nouns. For example, Tokyo's traffic is similar to, just like, or the same as New York's. Another example, like New York, Tokyo has traffic problems. Equally is an adverb. It describes an adjective, like crowded in this example. An adverb can also describe a verb or another adverb. For example, Tokyo and New York City are equally crowded. Paired conjunctions are always used together. Notice that the word that comes after the second conjunction must be the same part of speech as the word that comes after the first conjunction. This is an important rule in English and is called the rule of parallelism. Now look at these examples. The two cities are both trendy and hip. The two cities are not only trendy but also hip. The two cities are both trendy and hip. Now pay attention that trendy and hip are both adjectives, so they would be correct to be used here. Now let's look at an incorrect sentence. The two cities are both noisy and have too many people. So here, since noisy is an adjective and have too many people is a verb phrase, and they are not the same part of speech, this sentence would not be correct. Let's look at other examples. Both New York City and Tokyo have outstanding international restaurants. Tokyoites and New Yorkers can both eat and drink in any kind of restaurant. The two cities have both positive and negative features. Not only Tokyoites, but also New Yorkers dress fashionably. You can see joggers not only in Central Park, but also in Hibuya Park. Now let's look at contrast signals. Contrast signals point out differences. Sentence connectors connect two independent clauses. For example, most baby animals can walk within a few hours of birth. In contrast, or on the other hand, or however, a human baby needs about 12 months to learn this skill. Use but when the ideas are exact opposites. For example, the language center is on the left side of the brains of right-handed people, comma, but it is on the right side of the left-handed and ambidextrous people. Use yet when one idea is a surprising or unexpected continuation of the other idea. It is also possible to use but. For example, the left side of the brain controls logic and reasoning, comma, yet it also controls language. Use while and whereas when the ideas are exact opposites. While and whereas can begin either clause. Always use a comma even when the independent clause comes first. This is an exception to the usual rule. For example, I have brown eyes, comma, while or whereas my brother's eyes are green. Another example, While or whereas I have brown eyes, comma, my brother's eyes are green. Use although, even though, or though when one idea is a surprising or unexpected continuation of the other idea. Although, even though, and though can sometimes, but not always, begin either clause. For example, my grandfather is the wisest man in our town, although, even though, or though he never finished high school. Another example, although, even though, or though he never finished high school, comma, my grandfather is the wisest man in our town. From and unlike are both prepositions showing contrast. Put a noun or noun phrase after them. Differently is an adverb. It describes the verbs think and learn in our example. Now look at these examples. The way left-brained people think and learn is different from the way right-brained people do. Unlike left-brainers, comma, right-brainers often know the answer to a math problem without knowing how they got it. Left-brained people think and learn differently from the way right-brained people do. And finally, defer is a verb that shows contrast. For example, left-brain and right-brain people differ in the way they think and learn.